My name is Akash Agarwal, and I will be doing my biofuel presentation on biodiesel. Let's start by asking, what is biodiesel? Biodiesel is a renewable biofuel made from vegetable oils, animal fats, or even recycled grease. It was first made in 1853 using a process called trans-esterification, making vegetable oil into an actually usable fuel source. However, the first modern form of biodiesel, like we see today, was made in 1930. Biodiesel is grown using common crops, which have high oil contents, using oilseed crops like soybeans, sunflowers, algae, or canola. Another important factor for biodiesel growth could potentially be algae. Photosynthesis allows for these crops and algae to gain biomass, which can then be converted into fuel, and all of this oil can be transformed into biodiesel like we've seen before. Let's ask how it's made. Fats and oils in these crops react with short-chain alcohols like methanol and ethanol. Ethanol is more commonly used just because it's cheaper. Once these alcohols react with the vegetable oils or fats, it produces glycerol and crude biodiesel. The crude biodiesel gets refined and turned into regular biodiesel, which we can use for energy. However, it also produces crude glycerin as a byproduct, which can either be refined or recovered to repeat back into a cycle to produce even more biodiesel. The most common biodiesel types currently are B5 and B20, each referring to the percent biodiesel contents. Currently, these are being used as fuel in trucks, cars, tractors, boats, and electrical generators, with B100 not being used for fuel, but instead as a earlier product which we can transform into a more usable thing. We're also investigating algae as a potential alternative for biodiesel production, which is still currently in research and development. As for the carbon footprint of biodiesel, it can vary wildly per crop. However, across almost all of the crops seen, we see that it's actually more CO2 intensive than regular diesel production. Bioethanol, however, has a currently lower CO2 emissions, so it's really important that we work on getting biodiesel as low as possible. One thing from the chart we can see here is that used cooking oil is actually quite low, as most of the CO2 produced is just for growing the crops themselves, not the actual emissions. As for the economic impact, we can see that biodiesel has created an immense economic impact over the years. The biofuel sector contributed over $42 billion in economic impact, consisting of over 107,000 jobs, with the U.S. having a near 6 billion gallon supply in the year of 2024. And if we look at the chart, we can see just how drastic the increase is for our across 5 years of biodiesel production, showing that biodiesel has real potential to be a very usable fossil fuel. Sorry, not fossil fuel, alternative fuel. As for outreach, the National Biodiesel Education Program has been working to actively educate and raise awareness about biodiesel fuel. Education and technical support programs are also being conducted, and the USDA is giving over $100 million in grants to further biodiesel research in the US. Now let's talk about a plan of action. As we've seen before, current biodiesel production is extremely inefficient, expensive, and overall worse for the environment than standard fossil fuel diesel. However, the potential is there for an incredibly important fossil fuel replacement. First, we need to create programs that reward oil recycling and collection, as oil recycling has seen some of the lowest CO2 footprint out of all of the other crops. We can also reward farmers for low impact farming, as one of the main drivers of the CO2 impact of biodiesel is the sheer amount of CO2 and carbon footprint that is required just to grow the crops. We should also invest heavily into researching algal biodiesel and crop diversification to prevent a higher carbon footprint in the crop growth stage, as the algae has a significantly lower carbon footprint required to grow than standard crops. And here are the sources I used. Thank you for listening.